You make a bunch of noise out here, so they have peace and quiet in here. Because there's no better sound than the squeak-free guarantee from Advantech Subflooring and Advantech Subfloor Adhesive.
Welcome to the UnBuild podcast. I'm your host, Pete Yost. Host Pete Yost, I like that. Here with...
You're a poet and didn't even know it.
Very close to it. With my buddy, the co-poet and co-pilot, Steve Basic. And Jim.
Howdy.
Hello. So you guys and gals are submitting a lot of questions, and that's a great thing because they're always good questions.
I mean, what did we get last month? I think we got like 10,468.
Yeah, they're blistering. I have to buy more electrons in my house when these come through.
Pete answers all of them, and sometimes he just answers yes.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the answer is just yes.
No,
It depends.
I have a
Depends.
automatic plug for all building science questions. It depends or yes. So that's the way to do it. So here's the first question for today. Hey, UnBuild It podcast. I have a 1900s historic home that has lap siding over tongue groove sheathing. Due to extensive storm damage, I'm getting all of my siding and sheathing replaced and have the opportunity to add exterior insulation and modern sheathing. With all the talk of vapor barrier replacement, I don't want to make the mistake of installing an assembly that causes rot and mold from condensation. One wall runs the full height of the two-story house with plenty of rain exposure, and I'm in climate zone 5, Indianapolis. What would you recommend as an assembly? For reference, I was thinking zip sheathing, rigid exterior insulation, furring strips, then siding. Thank you for spreading your knowledge. It makes it sound like we're almost viral. So I think we're being asked to spec a wall assembly for climate zone 5.
And we're going to assume that this house is probably old enough, the way he describes it, that it's a 2x4 wall then probably.
Historic
2x6.
1900s.
Yeah.
I'll bet you it's rough cut 2x4, or let's say that it is.
Well, I hate to just be like, I have the same solution the way that we design houses, Steve, but if we're talking about adding exterior insulation and we're talking about zip, why wouldn't we just be talking about ZIPR and making one trip around the building?
Does make it easier.
Well, while I agree, let's just play devil's advocate and see what we come up with and say, yeah, our preference would be to use ZIPR because we like the configuration of that assembly. So for reference, he was saying zip sheathing, rigid exterior insulation, which would be, I assume this is in order, right? So zip sheathing for structural and then into to that rigid exterior insulation. No,
Exterior.
I'm sorry, this is the opposite. We're going from zip sheathing with rigid on the outside of that, furring strips, then siding. Okay, so the first question that comes up to me with this, and we get this all the time, is, wait a minute, I thought that we put the exterior insulation to the outside of the sheathing so that we warmed the structural sheathing with the exterior insulation. And essentially, the question here is, isn't ZIPR backwards, right?
It is.
So what are we trying to protect? We're trying to protect the sheathing, almost always. And so if we put the sheathing to the exterior of the rigid insulation, and it has good drying potential to the exterior, even though it's colder, right, we're going to keep it drier. It's true that putting the exterior insulation to the outside warms that, but then your first condensing surface, if the insulation is exterior to the sheathing, is the sheathing. With ZIPR, the first condensing surface is the interior surface of the rigid insulation. And so that's the difference between the two systems. It's basically getting what you need in terms of control layers, but with a different configuration of the wall. So let's start off by saying in both these systems, it's going to have a continuous air control layer on the outside. Doesn't matter whether you do it with ZIPR or whether you do it with exterior rigid insulation.
Or it could be the regular zip.
Could be the regular zip.
And me jumping to, well, we're going to do ZIPR, we do have to know what the interior of the walls are. If it's super old and it's in my market, that plaster's kind of falling apart, and they've already put vinyl wallpaper up to hold the plaster together. There's even vinyl wallpaper on the ceiling to hold the plaster together. You know what I mean? Like, there are obviously a whole host of other things that we have to be concerned with and we have to worry about. But if we just have gypsum wallboard on the inside and we have that option, then we can look at doing a non-vapor permeable insulation on the outside. But we have a whole host of things that we can screw to the outside of a zip sheathing, right?
It's interesting too that it's always difficult to spec a full assembly when we don't know what the full assembly is. So if this is 1900s home and they're not stripping it from the inside, it's almost certainly plaster in Indianapolis. And then the question becomes, what have they done to the inside face to change the way that works? In the Northeast, when the plaster fails, we don't generally see vinyl siding. We see sheets of interior, now I'm going to forget the term.
Paneling?
Paneling. It's going to be wood paneling.
Paneling happens sometimes in our market too.
Yeah.
The first poor people step is the vinyl wallpaper to hold it together in my market.
But that wood paneling sort of has the same impact as the vinyl siding because it is a pretty low class vapor retarder as well, just because it's got
because it's melamine, or not melamine, the brown particle, masonite.
Yeah. So its vapor permeability is pretty low. So we'd like this to have either drying to the exterior if we don't have it to the interior. But he does make an interesting comment here, which is a full height on one side of the house, 2-story, with a lot of rain exposure. So again, you want to make sure that you've got your water control layer complete.
Yeah, zip and a Rainscreen though, like, good work.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah, I don't think in climate zone 5. I'm trying to insulation on the outside could be fiberboard too, or something, or a wood board insulation.
Yeah, that opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of
Rockwell's comfort board, something that's more permeable than others.
So let's back off from being prescriptive and just say, as long as your assembly has really good bulk water control and you're taking the pressure of whatever water gets past the cladding because you've rain screened it. So that means full drainage, and it means probably convective drying of the air that moves through there. That's going to give a lot of forgiveness to the entire assembly. He doesn't ask about what do I have to do in terms of minimum R value of exterior sheathing given what's happening to the interior in terms of avoiding condensation during the winter. But that's readily available in the code for Climate Zone 5. And again, I get this question a lot. Well, wait a minute. How do I avoid getting any condensation on the interior, first condensing surface? And the answer to that question is...
Build in San Diego?
Exactly. In other words, if you're in a cold climate, you are at some point during an hour during the winter probably going to get some condensation on the first condensing surface.
Yep.
What the code says is take the 3 coldest months, and do an average. That average doesn't mean you're going to avoid all condensation. It just means that you're going to have a small amount of potential condensation that's not going to be a worry bead in your pocket.
Yeah. Right. Does it have more drying than it has more wetting? That's the only thing we're worried about, right?
The other thing, too, is that when you do a dew point calculation, you're making assumptions about what the interior relative humidity is in the house, because that affects what happens in terms of condensation, too. So you're basically trying to pick some conditions that are either average or pretty severe so that you avoid significant condensation on that surface.
The thing he doesn't ask about that I'd be curious is, where do you put the window in that? And what kind of window is it?
Yeah.
What are you attaching it to the zip? Are you attaching it to the rigid insulation? What type of rigid insulation? Where's the drainage plane? All of those things.
That's really important because you could do a great job with configuring the opaque wall, and
Yeah, but the minute you cut a hole in it, you're done.
My guess is because it's storm damage to the siding, he's not moving the windows. And so he's leaving the windows where they're at.
And so he's going to put zip over the window flange?
It sounds like he's going to replace the cladding or the current sheathing with zip, and then he's going to push insulation outboard of that, which is going to be easier than putting zip on.
But you could put the window on top of the zip, or you could put it on top of the insulation.
Well, I was working on a project in northern Vermont where she was trying to make a decision about whether to replace the windows as part of completely redoing her cladding system. And I said, we're going to have to pull the windows anyway because the windows are improperly flashed. You're going to spend all this money, and you're right, we'll get the opaque wall right, but we won't get the windows right. And so she said, yeah, but now you've moved from replacing the exterior cladding to taking my whole wall apart and putting in new windows. And I said, I don't know what to tell you.
I moved to doing it the right way.
Yeah, but it it took her quite a while to sort of work around to
Doubled the cost of that siding job.
at least double. Yeah. But I shouldn't say fortunately, but they had put up, and it was a builder working with her husband at the time. Essentially, the flashing system around the windows was simply the window flange maybe overlapped properly with the Tyvek. I mean, it was horrible. She had a lot of problems with water leaking at the head and pouring out the sill, and especially on the side of the house that was exposed to wind-driven rain. So I'm glad you brought this up, Steve, because we don't know anything about the windows, and that's a huge part of doing this right. We can get the opaque wall right, but man, you're gonna have to figure out what to do with these windows. Do you? I have never found a way to properly flash a window without pulling it.
Yeah.
Because it's the sill that you can't do properly.
The other one to not be able to properly flash a window is without pulling brick. Like when people are like, oh, I want to replace windows. I had clients in the last 2 years, the whole house is brick. And they're like, we want to do replacement windows. We already have a bid from this other contractor, but we're not sure about his quality of work. And I said, well, did he bid pulling brick? And they're like, no. And I said, well, then he's not planning on doing the windows in a way that he can ensure water tightness. And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, he's planning on caulking them to the brick.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they were like, oh, well, and I explained it, and they were like, oh, well, we certainly don't want to do it the way he's planning on doing it. And then I gave him a bid, and they were like, we're going to go with the other guy. I was like, yeah, because you don't want to pay an extra $75,000 worth of brickwork that then probably isn't going to match either, because matching that mortar to go back is really difficult. Like, and that's a really crappy thing. And so like every time I've been doing brickwork on things, I'm like, we should do a row lock detail around the window so that row of brick could come out easy and replace the window, or we should do a trim detail around the window where
when we do new construction, we'll oversize the rough opening and put a couple bucks in there, and then just trim them out inside the opening
so that somebody could replace
so
it.
that when someone pull the window.
I think this is a huge issue, and we talk. I don't know whether you should talk about this or not, but if we install
podcast, we can talk about whatever you want.
If we installed all windows from the interior and made them plug and play, we would never have to pull a window from the outside again.
Yep.
But
that doesn't make it easier. I don't buy that. So makes it easier to pull the window in and out, but it doesn't make the connection to flashing or the WRB.
For another day.
For another day.
Thank you, podcast listener. Okay, the other question.
Oh, there's a part 2?
There is a part 2.
Okay.
You're going to like this one. It starts off.
This one's from Noah.
Noah.
Yeah.
So I built a boat and...
Yeah. I'm trying to keep my boat.
Trying to keep the elephant section.
You're going to like this one from the very address. Hello, gentlemen and Steve.
All right.
It's right
That's why I included this one in what we're going to talk about.
I'm not saying anything to this time, Noah. You can go sink your boat
Maybe he's
and ride it to the bottom of the Black Sea. How's that?
I am planning to build a home for my wife and me in the next 2 years. I am a foreman for a contractor and will self-perform as much as I have time to do, and excited to implement some neat building science ideas. I plan to use standing seam metal roof and have pondered if a rain screen on top of the roof deck, zip sheathing for the whole house, would be a good idea. I hear about rain screens on wall sheathing all the time, but never seem to hear it used on roof assemblies. Would there be any use in doing so? Any potential drawbacks? By the way, I love the banter between you all. It always cracks me up. I hope you don't disappoint this listener at the end of the podcast.
Oh, I'm not going to disappoint him. I'm just not going to say anything.
So, heck yeah. What a great question.
Mm-hmm.
We constantly talk about water's the number one killer in buildings, and what sees the most water out of your entire building besides your bathtub is your roof.
Kitchen sink.
Here.
Yeah. And water held in tension is the biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime that we can relieve water held in tension, which is one of the best parts about a rain screen, where we're creating that space, well, guess what? There's a whole bunch of manufacturers that make products to do exactly this.
So the question is, why do we not do rain screens as often on roof assemblies as we do on walls?
Do you have an answer for that?
I think it's related to the type of cladding, right, that we're typically using. I mean, if you are using asphalt shingles, then you have to create that space by adding in nail base. There's another way to do it. So that's expensive. And if it's standing seam metal, right, your metal roofer is almost certainly going to say, well, I can't put it directly on the sheathing. You're going to be running your rain screen vertically, and that doesn't work out well with a vertical system of roof cladding. So now all of a sudden it's gotten even a little bit more complicated to rain screen. So we should be doing this, and we do have the technology. It's just that it doesn't get done as often.
It doesn't get as high of adoption as the walls. And maybe partly because we really do have roofing figured out where we don't have constant leaks. And it's not as a challenge as an environment as our walls for trying to protect buildings. Roofers have had it figured out for much longer than the cladding.
Yeah, and it's interesting, though, maybe what it's related to is that if you have an attic, a vented attic, then you've got a lot of forgiveness built into that. And so if you do have a problem with the roofing, it's not generally catastrophic. And, you know, when I go up into roofs that are leaking, it's almost always because there's a complex part of the building that maybe didn't get done perfectly. It's rarely in the field or a penetration. So when you move to assemblies that are more like walls, where that means the building's cathedral or the roof's cathedral, right? And so in that assembly, you would think that a rain screen would be really important because you don't have the forgiveness of an attic. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You're still not participating.
Oh, I'm participating. I said sure. I agreed with you.
So from an actual product standpoint, is it Casella Dorkin still, or is it just Dorkin now? I think it's just Dorkin.
Yeah.
Dorkin makes a
It's where you buy all your clothes.
Delta. No, that's what they are once he puts them on. Dorkin makes Delta Trella, which is like their membrane with basically what looks like a cedar breather on the back of it. It's a very thin Brillo patty 3D matrix that's not super thick. But you and I were looking today out in the shop at Sharkskin makes a dimple mat, like what we would use on a foundation that's allowable on a roof, that it's made for a roof.
Yeah.
There are 4 or 5 other manufacturers when I started looking, not even for this question, for something else, that like there are plenty of options available on the market the majority of them are for metal roofing, though. I don't know any of them that are specifically manufactured for asphalt roofing.
The other thing that comes up quite often when I am being asked to comment on these type of assemblies is putting down a vapor impermeable roofing underlayment and then venting on top of that. And that just doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, you need, if you want drying capacity to the structural sheathing, between the airspace or the Rainscreen space and the street sheathing, you have to put down something that's vapor open. And you would think that would be intuitive, but I get quite a feel like, well, I've got the airspace there. I said, yeah, but it's not connected to helping out the sheathing. And the other question I often get is, hey, does it really make any difference if the vent space is on the underside of the structural sheathing or on the top side? And the only difference I can think of is, well, if it's a bulk water leak and it's top side, it's going to run down your roofing underlayment. And if it's...
What was that question again?
The question is, does it matter if the vent space on the roof sheathing is to the interior or to the exterior?
I got you.
And no, as long as you have moving air and on one side or the other, that's fine. But the question is, if you have a bulk water leak to the cladding, if your space is topside, it's going to run down the roofing underlayment. If it's not, it's going to run down the vent chute.
But if you had a cathedral ceiling, putting it on the top side, then you have the vented over roof basically.
Yeah.
And you could still have a cathedral ceiling.
And more like the wall.
Yeah. And is it you, Steve, or is it Joe that I've heard say, like, Mother Nature doesn't give a shit if it's a roof or...
Yeah, Mother Nature don't care. But the laws of physics are laws of physics.
It's just
we're just inserting it into her world.
Mm-hmm. And he doesn't say anything about the slope of the roof. I think we are of the opinion that, yes, slope helps with...
I'm not giving an opinion.
We're of the opinion that slope doesn't matter because...
We use a product called entangled mesh quite often.
Yeah.
It's made for metal roofs.
Yeah.
I call it a 3D printed matrix.
Yes, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's called...
Yeah. And there are some metal roofing products.
I mean, you use cedar breather. You can put cedar breather underneath a metal roof.
Yep.
Yeah.
It works.
Like, I don't know if it's more than just zinc. Zinc doesn't allow you to do full contact with the substrate because any water held in tension on the backside can cause corrosion or it's galvanization or whatever the product. I don't know what the
process is.
Yeah. But this is pretty timely too because I'm publishing right now on Build Show Network a series called What Should I Use? And Pete and I just recorded recorded an episode on What Should I Use roofing, and we talked about these products as well. So you can go and check that out. It publishes very soon.
NOAA has been helped immensely times 3, I think, here. And does it matter what the climate is? No, you still need to weather protect and promote drying regardless of the climate pretty much. So
what about direction that the roof faces? Orientation. Do we have any challenges there? Haven't you shown that we might get bypass on the ridge?
You mean in terms of fog testing and so on?
The venting?
What I found in that wing nut testing is that there's 3 things that move air if you're trying to use air to dry things. Either a mechanical fan, that's not an option in that vent space, the wind, and then stack effect. And the stack effect is driven most by how much energy that roof surface sees. So
from the sun.
And so if that roof heats up at all, air just goes roaring from high to low, soffit to ridge. And if the roof is cold on the other side, the fog runs up the roof and sometimes goes out the ridge vent, but quite often rolls down the other side. And so the question is, well, is that a good or a bad thing? It's still air movement.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter which direction it's going.
Going out the ridge is no different than going out the other side. It's still passing through.
And I was shocked that that fog got up, and some of it did go out the vent, but a lot of it just rolled down and ended up coming out the other soffit. It's still airflow. And, what's going to happen is as the sun goes across from south, the south face to the north face or east to west, in the afternoon, the exact opposite is going to happen. It's going to run up the west side and down the east. So as long as you get
Be a downeaster.
A downeaster. I think you just invented a new weather term. Are you a meteorologist?
No.
In your spare time?
I'm just here to separate the wheat from the chaff.
So, I think we've done enough damage for episode
No, I still got more damage.
94.
I got more damage.
You do?
Yeah. I had to get rid of my rooster. We had a rooster. He's like, every morning, bug the hell out of the neighbors. So I had to get rid of him. So I bought a duck instead. So he can run around the backyard. So now I wake up at the quack of dawn.
Okay.
Do you want to
You still laughing?
one instead?
No, I like that one.
The quack of dawn.
The quack of dawn.
We're going to, what we're going to do? We're going to introduce a poll so that people can
I think you
register the
I think you're
strength of
setting yourself up for some immense disappointment.
My wife would say, yeah, no big surprise. Set myself up for disappointments.
Not.
If you want to get on the air, you can.
Yeah, Pete's going to point at me because he doesn't know the email address still. Questions at UnBuild Podcasts. Thank you for sending in your questions. Pete's right. They really are great content. We do enjoy getting the content. Pete answers them in a timely fashion, even though it might take us 6 months or a year to find time to answer them on the podcast. In this format, you do get a quick answer most of the time. And we really have enjoyed answering them on the air. They are good discussion topics, and we probably wouldn't have thought to discuss this topic in particular on the air, and it was a good one. So thank you.
I will say that the simpler and cleaner you keep it, for me, the easier it is for me to go after. But I have to admit, I can't believe I'm doing this. It's hard not to feel that you need to contribute a lot of information and to answer these questions without a whole bunch of conditions or exceptions. The more detail you provide, the closer we can come to answering.
I think you should just write in a whole bunch that goes something like, hey guys, I'm thinking about building a house. Like, what should my wall assembly be? I'm renovating my house. What should I put on the outside? I like those kinds
What
of
kind
questions.
of house should I build?
What kind of house should I build?
I have a family. We're thinking about
Maybe
doors.
building a house. What do you think?
Please tell me the type of house to build so that I can make my partner happy. Boy, okay, now we're responsible for marital bliss as well. And that's definitely not a place we should go. Thanks, everybody. See you next week, next episode.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.